Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. The Tata Steel tournament begins today, Saturday, in Wijk aan Zee in the North Netherlands on the North Sea coast. And it is always a highlight in the chess calendar. The organisers always manage to put together a really attractive field of established stars and young talent coming through. So you always get some shock results in this tournament. And, well, let's just run through the lineup very quickly. We have at the top Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano Caruana and Anish Giri. Those are the top three players, and I'm expecting those three, realistically, those are the three that are going to be fighting for first place. However, there are some very interesting players who might make a challenge. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, always very dangerous. Richard Rapport, very creative player, now number 11 in the world. And Jan Krzysztof Duda, who's shown tremendous form this year. Sergei Karyakin, Santosh Gujarati Vidit. We have Daniel Dubov. Well, he's such an interesting player. Andrei Yesipenko from Russia, who, well, he defeated Carlsen last year. Sam Shankland, Jorden van Foreest, who won the tournament last year. That was a real surprise. More on him in a second. Niels Grandelius from Sweden, and the youngest competitor, Ramesh Babu Pragyanananda from India. So, yeah, Carlsen's the favourite. But last year, Jorden van Foreest won it. I want to focus on him. It seems only right to focus on last year's winner. He's now rated 35 in the world, and he's over 2,700. And, well, this year he was working, or I say this year, last year at the end of 2021, he was working in Magnus Carlsen's team for the World Championship. So he would have gained a lot of knowledge just by doing that kind of really rigorous preparation. And I want to show you a game where he also shows some very interesting preparation. You know, it's clear that he works extremely hard. This was played in the FIDE Chess.com Grand Swiss Tournament in Riga. So a classical game at the end of October. So he has white. Van Foreest has white against Surya Ganguly from India, very experienced grandmaster. So it's in English. And now the game could go into a Queen's Gambit or a Nimzo after d4 and d5 or bishop b4. But Van Foreest keeps it in pure English lines by playing e4. So this can lead to very sharp positions. The pawn would like to advance to e5. d5 is the main move here. c5 used to be played, but d5 is currently kind of accepted practice for black. e5, one can take and then play e5, but this is kind of the old way of playing. And now we have these exchanges in the middle, and queen takes f6 and knight f3. So this is a well-known position, and the old move used to be e5 there, which can lead to some orthodox stuff after d4 and some crazy stuff with bishop d3. But anyway, instead Ganguly plays b6. He's also very well prepared, preparing to play bishop b7. And here is where Van Foreest comes up with a fascinating move. Just have a think about this position. You know, what would you play here with white? What seems like the most natural move? You know, you're sitting down, you're playing, you think to yourself, okay, I've got to bring my pieces out, I've got to play a normal move, I want to control the centre, I play d4, and then I bring the bishop into the game and I get castled. Very good. And that's been played in a few hundred games if you would like to consult your database. But what did Van Foreest play here? I mean, if you were to guess this move without knowledge of this position, how many of you would come up with this next move? Pawn to c5. just giving a pawn away for seemingly nothing. This can be taken in two ways. It could be ignored. Let's see what happens. Obviously, pawn takes damages the structure. It means maybe after rook b1, well, the bishop won't come here. So I can understand why pawn takes pawn, might give white some compensation. But Ganguly just took the pawn with the bishop. I mean, it looks so straightforward. But watch what happens. d4 gains a tempo against the bishop. The bishop goes back to d6. Bishop d3. And now this also gains a tempo. So white has won two developing moves. It gains a tempo because white now threatens to play bishop g5, trapping the queen. So black has to counter that and waste a move. When you'd like to be developing, you'd like to be playing your pieces out, you'd like to be getting castled, but instead you have to make that rather unfortunate move. And now, instead of just castling, which would mean the bishop comes to b7 and black looks fine, bishop e4, threatening the rook. So black is forced to play c6. So you can see black has not been able to get that bishop to the long diagonal. And now Foreest castles and Ganguly castles and rook e1. So it's been sacrificing that pawn has just been about rapid development for white, which means that black's pieces have been restricted. So let's see, can white use this lead in development and use this kind of space advantage as well? So c4 controls more space. Bishop b7. So, given a few moves, then if black can develop and maybe protect that bishop and get in c5, then black will be fine. But can you actually achieve that? It's going to take time to protect that bishop, for example. So this freeing break with c5, the move you'd like to play, isn't actually available, or it's going to take a long time to organize that. In the meantime, white is able to develop some initiative. Now, I think this next couple of moves from white also very interesting. How many of us would just play bishop b2 here? I mean, it looks reasonable. But Foreest played rook b1. Well, that sometimes has ideas of playing c5 because there's a pin here. But there's another idea as well. After rook b1, knight d7, rook b3. It's all about activating this rook, and you just have a funny feeling at some moment it might like to switch to the king side. So it's all about preparing a king side attack. Rook c8, and now bishop b2. So the bishop does come here. It's on a fantastic diagonal. It's protected by the rook. So that means that d5 becomes a possibility, or sometimes c5 as well. So white is building up very nicely. Already those bishops look fantastic. And here, Ganguly played rook e8. Knight f8 would protect some squares on the king side. But then queen a1 I think is very interesting. That's another benefit of moving the rook up the board. That queen can come into the corner. And I wonder whether he was worried about that move with the idea of d5 and hitting that g7 pawn. It's a very attractive position for white because black cannot challenge white's centre, and white is using that space advantage to manoeuvre behind and get some initiative on the king side. Anyway, in the game, rook e8 was played. And now Foreest strikes c5. So exploiting that pin, the pawn obviously can't take the pawn. So the bishop drops back. And now, okay, how do you develop the attack? h4. So the idea is that white wants to keep this diagonal open. So after g6, you can always prise it open with h5. That's the idea. The queen drops back, so feeling the heat, doesn't want to stand in the line of the bishop. And now, okay, white carries through the plan. This diagonal is open. We want to put the queen and bishop on this diagonal, and then queen h7 mate. It's that simple. But you can do that when you have space. You've carved out territory. So your pieces have freedom to maneuver, and just compare with black's pieces. All of them now behind the first three ranks, and it's a miserable position. It really is. Rook c7. Oof. These tight maneuvers, but, well, in the meantime, that threatens checkmate. So, as said before, if g6, then the diagonal can be prized open with the good old h-pawn. And knight, excuse me, knight f6, I can imagine d5 is a killer there, and bishop takes knight. So f5 played, but that obviously opens up the king, it weakens e6, and the rook swings across. Well, as if by magic, this rook comes into play. Wasn't it prescient that rook b1 to b3 was played, and now the rook swings over? Beautiful coordination, and hits that weak point on e6. Bishop c8. So some kind of attempt to defend this. Queen b3 attacks the pawn again, but not just that pawn. Now there's pressure here. There's a pin, and after knight f6, bishop takes f5. That's the really important one to get, because then this diagonal is open. White has recovered the pawn and just has all the positional trumps. It's wonderful space. Knight d5. So this actually wins material. Bishop is attacked. The rook is attacked. Actually, yeah, you could even save things with rook e4, but no. Anyway, Van Foreest just keeps that bishop, because it's this diagonal that is really important. That diagonal. Knight takes rook. Rook takes knight. And now the way is clear again. Queen c2, the queen comes back to where it wants to be. Queen h7 check, and this is the end. So this queen is in. This queen can't really come over to defend. And now it's just a case of bringing the rest of the army in. Knight e5. And that also opens up the third rank for the rook if necessary on one of these squares. Bishop takes knight, pawn takes, queen takes h4, but it's all in vain, and now bishop g6. So we just have to corner the king. Before we start checking, let's just make sure it's boxed in. Bishop d7, and now you could check, but the king would... this is still winning for white. Looks tremendous, but actually instead of that, let's just keep the king boxed in. Rook d3 is a very clean kill. The idea is this. Okay, let's give black a random move. Pawn takes pawn. Check. Rook takes bishop, and queen takes rook. Mate. Very, very nice. So after rook d3, in fact, Ganguly resigned. There really is no defense to all this stuff. An absolutely beautiful game, and a stunning novelty. I think, according to my database, Van Foreest was the first to play this. I don't know whether he picked it up from somewhere else or, just his preparation, but it worked out beautifully. Interestingly, not a few weeks after this, who picked up on this idea? Nodibek Abdusatorov, who used it in a game in Sitges in Spain and won a really nice game with it. There you go. Abdusatorov, we know he did rather well at just before New Year. So, Tata Steel Masters beginning today, Saturday. I won't be able to cover the first couple of days, or at least I'll be a little bit late in reporting on those days, but I'll do my best to catch up. And I'm looking forward to an absolutely splendid tournament. See you soon.